Welcome to this Martin Luther King Day, Money Monday. Yes, while all of you are sitting home, relaxing, celebrating the legacy of a great man, Dr. Martin Luther King, we're here working, bringing you the best of the news, markets, and politics every single day. And today is a Money Monday like no other. The markets are closed, so we don't have to focus on any of that stuff. What we do have to focus on is you stay right there, because we are going to serve up one heck of a Money Monday for you today when Kimberly Guilfoyle, recently appointed chairperson of Donald Trump's campaign finance committee for his reelection, and she's going to tell us everything that's going on in the campaign. This is a huge day for us. It's a huge day for America. Everyone gets a day off to remember the great Dr. Martin Luther King. And speaking of great, Frankie is over in the Frank Zone, where he is every single day. Hey, Frankie, happy Martin Luther King Day.
Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day observed, and happy to all of you who are celebrating it. And that is precisely what I am speaking frankly about. There's two aspects of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, which is pretty substantial, obviously, as a civil rights leader, as a leader of African Americans and impoverished people generally, as a spokesperson for the cause of civil disobedience and nonviolent protests. But there's two aspects of his legacy that I think often get forgotten about, one of which has to do with the fact that he was one of the most prominent Americans in history tortured by the FBI. You'll remember, and this has all come out, you remember the FBI actually sent Martin Luther King Jr., among the other things they did, they sent him a letter urging him to kill himself. The FBI did that. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is all public. You can see the letter for yourself. The FBI did that. Then they tried to cover it up when it did come out. And you have to wonder, I think one of the things we can learn a lot from Martin Luther King is how he handled being the subject of unfair prosecutions and investigations by the federal government. The other thing has to do with his anti-war record. Everyone always talks about the March on Selma. Everyone always talks about the March in Washington, D.C., and they should. But something that too often gets ignored is Martin Luther King's vociferous opposition to the Vietnam War. And he gave one of his best speeches against the Vietnam War right here in New York City. Here's a little bit of it.
There has never been such a monumental dissent during a war by the American people. Polls reveal that almost 15 million Americans explicitly oppose the war in Vietnam. Additional millions cannot bring themselves around to support it. This reveals that millions have chosen to move beyond the prophesying of smooth patriotism to the high grounds of firm dissent based upon the mandates of conscience and the reading of history. Now, of course, one of the difficulties in speaking out today grows out of the fact there are those who are seeking to equate dissent with disloyalty. It's a dark day in our nation when high-level authorities will seek to use every method to silence dissent. Something is happening and people are not going to be silent.
And the reason that I think it's so important to keep that aspect of King's legacy alive is because right now we are still fighting and losing American lives in what has already been the longest war in American history. And I wish we had a few more Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s around these days to speak so vociferously against the war in Afghanistan. And I wish people, Americans, would care about what those folks were saying. But as John mentioned, Wall Street and the stock market is closed today. Mail closed today. Every federal institution closed today because today is one of only 2 days that's a federal holiday named for an American. There's 365 days of the calendar year, and there are only 2 federal holidays named for Americans, and yet we're here working and doing a show. I think it's outrageous that we're doing a show today. I don't know whether it's the management of our show that's responsible for it, or actually I do have an idea of who's responsible for it, but whoever's responsible for this show's blatant disrespect for Dr. King and his legacy, and in my humble opinion, we should absolutely not be on the air today. I think it's insane. I think it's completely disrespectful, and I think it's a slap in the face to Dr. King and his legacy.
Okay. Well, I'm here to honor Dr. King. Frankie, if you would like to go home and celebrate the day, I think it's better for us to be on air and report the news and talk about his greatness rather than people watch a rerun and we all sit home on the couch. So
that's a fair point.
That's why we're in different zones, because we don't always have the same exact opinion.
Exactly.
I would like to know if you voiced those same opinions on your radio show this morning.
I did, as a matter of fact.
Okay, all right. So you're consistent.
That's right.
We know that about you. You're consistent.
That's right.
There's two ways you could look at it. You can sit home, do something with the family, and observe the day, or you can be here and talk to the masses who are home about the greatness of Dr. King.
I can't help but notice.
That's what I'll be doing today.
I can't help but notice that on other federal holidays like Christmas Day, Thanksgiving Day, New Year's Day, we were all off. And yet here we are.
You lobbied me. You lobbied me. You're like Julio Cesar Chavez over there. You're like a union leader. You lobbied me to give everyone off. We're a news program, a live news program, and our viewers, thank you all, who text me and email me and send me direct messages. They look forward to us bringing them their daily dose of liquid lunch.
Labor Day,
what we're doing.
Labor Day, another federal holiday, we were off. Memorial Day, another federal holiday, we were off. And you know what? I heard from the viewers.
This is the biggest week. Okay, this is the biggest week in history. Okay, we have only for the third time in history, Frank, a president facing impeachment. That kicks off tomorrow.
You know why it
Many
doesn't
news shows
kick
are
off
talking
today?
about it.
Because of the holiday.
Right. I understand that. And they need a few more days to complain a little more, I would assume. But, all right, you know, one big thing happened while we were away, Frank. We took down another ISIS leader.
Yes.
Which was
great news.
Big.
Actually, we got to give the Iraqis some credit, too. Their authorities were the linchpin of this.
While we were away this weekend, that happened. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, who both won their championship games yesterday. They'll both be moving forward to the Super Bowl, of course. And another reason that we wouldn't have off today, Frank, was it's like the Super Bowl for us. We got Kimberly Guilfoyle coming in studio today.
I see.
So when we get the call that Donald Trump's campaign finance chairperson is available on Monday, whatever the day is, I'm here. If she said she was going to come in on Christmas, I'd be here.
All right. Well, that's good to know.
You know, I think life goes on. We're all in a good place. We're here, and we're celebrating the great Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, he was a hard worker too, as you know.
He was certainly
one of the
a hard
hardest
worker.
working men out there. And basically, he sacrificed his life, or at least put his life on the line, and someone took it. For what he believed in.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, John, because I have been a big believer for a long time that there are a lot of unanswered questions about his assassination. I think it's very interesting that he was assassinated right around the time that he was leading the opposition to a war that President Johnson and leading members of the military-industrial complex were waging. And I'm not the only one that thinks that there was a conspiracy to kill Martin Luther King. You know who else does? A jury. 22 years ago, there was a jury in Memphis after hearing 70 witnesses. They ruled that the supposed assassin of Martin Luther King was a scapegoat and that he was actually killed as a result of a conspiracy that involved the mafia, the federal government agencies, and local law enforcement. And yet, DOJ kept James Earl Ray in prison until the day he died.
And speaking of conspiracy theories and JFK, today is the day in history when JFK was inaugurated.
Is that right?
Yes,
Wow.
today is the day.
I did not know that.
Today is also the day that the 52 hostages in Iran were released when Ronald Reagan took over.
I didn't mean to interrupt you about that terrorist, that terrible guy.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll get to that a little later. Before we get out of this segment, I want to remind you, if you're watching at home, We have Kimberly Guilfoyle coming up right here in hour 2 on the top of the hour of hour 2, 1 Eastern. We also have Erin Elmore with us today. She hasn't been here in a while, but she's a fantastic attorney, great friend of the show. And I want to use this last couple of minutes, Frank, because I continue to be aggravated by these left-wing polls that say the #1 issue for millennials in the 2020 election is climate change. You watching at home know I've done a science experiment to show you that melting ice doesn't make the sea level go higher. I've been reading you story after story, but this one I thought I would bring up to you. Now, everybody knows about the Weather Channel, okay? It's there, it's on your phone, it's everywhere. The guy who founded the Weather Channel, John Coleman, okay, just a few years back, in an open letter, attacked the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and he wrote, "The ocean is not rising significantly. The polar ice is increasing, not melting away, and polar bears are increasing in numbers." And he added, "There is no significant man-made global warming at this time. There has been none in the past, and there's no reason to fear any in the future." So, I don't know. We all get our weather from the Weather Channel. This is the guy who founded the Weather Channel, and he's saying that, you know, it's all a public relations ploy, and he says basically, he's quoted as saying global warming is the greatest scam in history, and he's the founder of the Weather Channel.
So John, last year, the decade that we just got out of, the last 10 years, last decade, was the hottest decade in recorded history, right? So
Understood.
Is that not of concern to you?
Well, I spoke about this last week. I think the day when you had to take the first hour off, you weren't, I don't know if you were here that day, but it's been widely reported that the way the Earth shifts on its axis and the distance it moves, you know, fractions of a millimeter or something, moves the Earth further or closer to the sun. And there's like 1 million year cycles. So we may be going through a cycle where it's a little hotter in a 10-year period, but over millions of years, it's basically just going up and down. So we'll keep our eye on it. You know, if something comes up that proves to me that CO2, man-made CO2, causes damage, I'm down to at least consider it and bring it to our audience. But I don't know about this whole global warming thing, and anytime I come across some good evidence, like the founder of the Weather Channel, I'm going to bring it to you. We're going to bring
Well, I do
all
want to
of
point
that.
out, before we depart on this topic, there's a terrific, lest anyone think that believing in global warming, which the vast majority of scientists agree upon, makes you some sort of liberal lunatic. There's a terrific op-ed in the Washington Post this weekend by George Shultz, a Republican who, of course, was Secretary of State to who? President Reagan. And the headline of this op-ed is "The Conservative Case for Climate Change." And they point out conservative solutions for dealing with the climate change crisis. So I'd encourage people to give it a read. Just because you believe in global warming doesn't make you a liberal. So if you see the brush fires in Australia and you think there's cause for concern, or you see things like the flooding that occurred in Hurricane Sandy and you think that's cause for concern, don't worry, it doesn't make you a socialist.
All right. Fantastic. Joe Pignon's going to be here a little later in hour 2. He's going to mix it up with Josh Kravitz. David Pietruz is going to be here. He's a presidential historian. And Dr. Robbie Ludwig also. Great show coming at you. More Liquid Lunch right after this.